Right, my friends, this was a game changer of a day for Ukraine. It was simply astonishing what just happened. I was wrong. Biden did permit long-range weapons. I'm admitting I'm wrong because I said I just don't see it in him. I just don't see him being willing to escalate. But he did. He did it today. And we'll talk all about that. This is one of the first three big stories. It's verified. It's in the New York Times. It's in AP. You find it over here in Radio Free Europe. You find it in all kinds of papers. Okay, so let's start here. So breaking, Biden allows to strike Russia with long-range ATACMS. Fortunately, it comes too late as usual, but okay, he's doing it. Biden allows the Ukraine to strike with long-range U.S. missiles. Now, when you get down into it, this is really interesting. Biden's reacting again instead of acting. It's never a good sign to find yourself trailing your opponent. Here, officials said Mr. Biden was persuaded to make the change in part by the sheer audacity of Russia's decision to throw North Korean troops at Ukrainian lines. Wait a minute. So that happened at least a month ago. Like if I'm looking at this, here is a video that I put out. It's worse than I thought. This video here, I looked at this on October 15th, what was actually happening. And I had pretty developed sense of what was going on by that point. So it's more than a month ago. It's November 17th today. And then you had all the other things that were happening. So it's predicated by this, but it took a long time, including the election that they were trying to get through and that sort of thing. The United States will be able to send a message to North Korea that it will pay a significant price for its involvement outweighed the escalation risks. Okay, so they're trying to balance these, but it was North Korea that caused this. It wasn't yesterday's terrible, well, last night's terrible strike that was, and we'll talk about that in just a little bit. Okay, according to the New York Times, President Biden, with 2 months left in office, has authorized Ukraine to use U.S. ATACMS long-range missiles for strikes inside Russia. Came in response, again, to the deployment of North Korean troops. It's confirmed in Reuters. Here's the actual here's the article in Reuters as well. Biden allows Ukraine to use U.S. arms. Let's just read just a few paragraphs to get a sense of what's going on here. Washington, November 17th. Joe Biden's administration has allowed Ukraine to use U.S.-made weapons strike inside Russia, to U.S. officials and a source familiar with the decision said on Sunday. Now, nothing has actually happened yet. No missiles, long-range missiles, were fired into Russia at this point. So I want you to be aware that nothing has actually transpired. Like they didn't hit the bridge, or they didn't hit into St. Petersburg or whatever. Nothing hit a big base. None of that has happened yet. The change comes largely in response to Russia's deployment of North Korean troops to the region. Russia has warned that it would see a move to loosen the limits on Ukraine's use of U.S. weapons as a major escalation. Yeah, and so just a week or two ago, they were saying that because you have to use U.S. satellites or Western satellites, we would consider this being at war with NATO. That was bluff, that was bluster, that was trying to prevent them from doing it. Ukraine's first deep strikes are likely to be carried out using ATACMS rockets, which have a range of up to 190 miles or 306 kilometers, according to the sources. Now, why are they just announcing it rather than just hitting them and then going, you know what, we gave them permission? Because I think, and this is my speculation on my part, I think it is part of a diplomatic response to de-escalate while you're escalating. So you're not just taking them by surprise and then causing, some kind of major retaliatory strike back, maybe something nuclear, but you're telling them that so that they know they're on notice. And in doing that, they're going to move some things around. They're going to move some planes or weapons or troops or whatever. They'll do that, but at least that way you won't escalate it further accidentally, which is what their deep fear is. So that's part of what's going on here. Again, nothing has been struck yet. They're giving permission. It is not clear if Trump will reverse Biden's decision when he takes office, but allowing it allows it to go on, and it's a little harder to reverse something than to do it in the first place, right? Trump has long criticized the scale of U.S. financial and military aid to Ukraine and has vowed to end the war quickly without explaining how. But okay, let's say Trump said we're not going to support anymore. If they've already allowed U.S. weapons to go on, it's conceivable that you could have a scenario where, let's say Trump's not allowing it, but would Trump allow European partners to buy those weapons and use those weapons without restriction? Probably. So, again, this is speculation, but okay, that's where we are. All right. Uh, Gitanas Nausėda, he is the president of Lithuania, says the day has come. Ukraine can now target military sites in Russia using long-range missiles. Now he's saying military sites, but that's all that Ukraine's going to go after is military sites. They're not hitting an apartment complex with little old ladies in it. This is a decisive moment in Ukraine's fight against the aggressor, Russia. Peace cannot be achieved through weakness. Peace is the reward of the strong. Stay strong, Ukraine. Absolutely, stay strong. Now, this is a map of what it actually looks like. Dozens of Russian military bases are within range of ATACMS missiles. This includes the headquarters for the Southern Military District in Rostov-on-Don, from where much of the invasion is being directed. The White House must not micromanage targeting permissions for ATACMS. That's my great fear, is that the White House is going to try to say, yes, you can use it, but only here, here, and here. Like that kind of thing. No, the gloves need to come off. This is a Russian map from Russia, and they're saying, like, look at all the places they can hit with these levels of rockets. Okay, and this is actually Moscow right here. Wow. Okay, Russian attacks on Ukraine's power grid last night forced nuclear plants to reduce output. So 2 out of 9 operating reactors are at full capacity because of the missile strike last night. But I want to make it very clear. I read through the article here and what actually happened. This permission was not because of one of the worst attacks of the war. Like they destroyed, I mean, they sent more than 100 missiles and at least 50 some odd, or 50 or so drones last night, just last night. But this wasn't a reaction to that. It's a reaction to North Korea from 4 weeks ago that's finally coming to fruition. 36 hours after the call between Scholz and Putin, as well as President-elect Trump's warning not to escalate, Russia launched its first massive winter terror wave, according to an official Ukrainian source, massive combined attack on all regions of Ukraine. So that was just last night. And this was just the timing of this was terrible. Scholz made this call just a couple of days ago. Putin said the same line that he would normally have said. Scholz said the same line, but then they used it as a propaganda piece. Zelensky said this is opening a Pandora's box, and it was. And then you have this massive attack. This is how many missiles and rockets were used. I've never seen a chart like this before. This is what it looked like within Ukraine last night. And these are the regions that were hit all across Ukraine. I mean, it was terrible. But that's not the reason that they allowed this. Again, Biden's approving, and he's approving it after what we know about, like, Kim Jong-un sending troops to North Korea a month ago. Okay, rescue efforts are still ongoing from last night's attack, targeting densely populated areas in Sumy with ballistic missiles. There was zero military objective here, but that's not why they allowed it. They allowed it. It was like too little, too late. Now, the question is, will the British and the French be allowed to use their long range as well? I think they are. That's what it looks like. Now, the question then becomes, is Germany going to allow tourists? Because just a week ago, Scholz was saying, I'm not going to allow them to fire weapons applied by us far into Russia. I'm going to be the Chancellor of Peace. You remember that speech here? I'm going to be the Chancellor of Peace. So I think he may need to be changing his tune. This was pretty terrible political timing for him. Okay, now, with all that being said, we got to understand that there are some caveats here, and Jane Key is pointing this out. With Biden, there's always a little back door for Putin, so whatever deal he has with him isn't broken. Biden administration will allow Kyiv limited use of ATACMS to strike enemy positions within Russia. Now, what that means exactly, we don't know. If that just means any military targets, that's great. That's what you need. If that means limited only to this one, that one, and the other one, that's not so great. Okay, now, that's the first big story. Second big story, what I would have talked about tonight is at least three Russian oil refineries have had to halt processing or cut runs due to heavy losses this year. Export curbs, rising crude prices, and high borrowing costs have driven the cuts as Russia's oil market struggles, according to Reuters. And I was going to talk more about the Russian economy. Like I saw something where producing ammunition, they actually had to borrow money in order to actually produce things. Like they're costing far more than it was actually supposed to cost in order to produce things. Like the economy's in bad shape. And then the other big story that I was going to be focusing on was Ukraine testing 4 types of domestically produced missiles. And with that, there's other things going on here, because before we knew that they had permission to use American weapons. Again, I even hearing myself say it, I'm like, wow, that's actually been allowed now. But without that being allowed, this was the only path forward. And now, if those restrictions come off, by the time the restrictions come off, they're going to have some of these ready to be able to continue to hit into Russia. And so this is a big, big deal, or it would have been a bigger deal before what happened tonight. Gary Kasparov says, good, of course, talking about the being allowed to use U.S. long-range missiles against Russia. Good, of course, but it's worth another reminder that doing the right thing early, simply because it's right, saves lives and reduces risks. Instead, rationalizations for self-deterrence that require even more convoluted reasons for finally acting. And then he went on and said, once you have voluntarily taken something off the table for no good reason, you look ignorant and or cowardly for having done it when you put it back on the table. It exposes a lack of original reasoning. Here, nothing has changed really. North Korea was just a pretext. I think he's right, but I'm not gonna rain all over the parade here. North Korea was a pretext that allowed Biden to do something that he wouldn't have allowed. But I think he can also frame that legitimately as, well, now Putin raised this bar, so we have to raise that to meet it. And I think that's fair. I was wrong. I thought Biden would never allow it, but apparently he did, and here we are. Because it's like their campaign is too little too late, because they feel they've always known better and don't learn, is a response to David Frum. What's David Frum saying? Why did the Biden wait until Team Moscow had won power in the U.S. to authorize Ukraine to strike back against Russia's air war? That's a good question. I was saying this about 5 months ago. Like unleash it now. If you can win, if you can show that you're like, this will be a good thing for you politically. If you can show that Ukraine is winning and you're ending this in a positive way by letting Ukraine prevail against an authoritarian neighbor trying to destroy a democracy. But nobody's listening to me. Okay, again, I was talking about this a month ago, and they finally came to the conclusion that now, so it's not about what happened last night. It's about North Korea, and that's what the cause of the escalation. Okay, there are no red lines. They never existed. We just need to understand that there are no red lines. How many times do we have to be like, fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me? What happens when you fool me a dozen times? I mean, well, what are we talking about at that point? And then finally, I showed this some time ago, but I think this is a legitimate reminder. No, we've never had Russian neighbors. You're the first. As the neighbors are, digging and taking their fence all the way over into his backyard and that sort of thing. Now it's time to reclaim that yard. All right, my friends, that's all that I have for you. Thank you for the time. Thank you for the likes, the shares, the subscribes. Thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.